Welcome back to Hot Mess Espresso, guys. We have Rebecca O'Hara on the podcast today. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So we've known each other for quite a while. We've been like
I don't know how
Facebook
long has it
friends
been?
forever.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute.
Yeah, a very hot minute. But we've never actually we've talked, but it's never really until I was like talking about the podcast and then you were like, "Oh my God, hey, so I have
Yeah.
something I want to talk about." And I was like, "No, please come on because this is very, very important." We're talking about communication on the podcast today. And as somebody who cannot communicate for shit, this is very I think
This,
I over communicate in the weirdest way. Like I think I'm an over communicator, but when it comes down to it, when it comes down to like being vulnerable and talking about like my feelings and stuff, I will shut the fuck down
yeah,
because I'm just sitting here like, no, they don't want to hear that.
yeah.
They just don't. And it's a lot of it's the BPD of like the rejection and this, that, and the third. But let's talk communication because we all suck at it. Let's be honest.
It's and that's exactly like what I do with a lot of my clients too, is like, we
Mm-hmm.
all communicate, but nobody really knows how to, and nobody really
No.
actually takes the idea of like how much words really mean to people, but also how
Mm-hmm.
much the same word is so wildly different to different people. And
That's
yeah, and that's a thing, and it goes through so much. You're talking about BPD, but also like trauma too. Like everything is
mm-hmm.
kind of working there. You don't get to BPD without something to help you get there, right? And I think you're totally right. Like nobody really knows how to communicate. We're all just out here, as I phrase it, like running with scissors and hoping it works.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much. And you're so right because like there are some trigger words for me that are just normal everyday like phrases and I hear them and I'm like, the fuck you did you just say to me? And people are like, it's not, but it's a trigger phrase just
Yeah.
from something that was just ingrained into my brain. And it's not like we come with a list of like, here's what's not to say to me. Like a lot of the times when you're in even like platonic relationships, like you don't realize how much words it's the whole like sticks and stones could break my bones, but
Yeah.
words will never hurt me. And that's a crock of shit. Let's just be honest
As
there.
he's, yeah. Yeah.
Absolute crock of shit because I'm pretty sure the words are a lot of the reason why I am cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So
Right
it's
though.
just,
But it's so true because right you're saying like, hey, I can talk about whatever, but as soon as things start getting
mm-hmm,
vulnerable, where you have to say things like, hey, this word's a trigger for me. I know it seems kind of silly, and I know it's not you, I know it's me. That whole conversation, that's so vulnerable. And people
mm-hmm,
with trauma, people with PPD, we've learned that that connection is not safe. Vulnerability is not safe because what happens after that is we get punished, or it's not the right answer, or we get neglected or ignored, or whatever that is.
it gets
So
used against us.
correct. And so it becomes a survival
Yeah.
skill, that shutting down. And then
Mm-hmm.
how, and then we grow up, right? So we grow up in these childhoods where we're told this is not safe. And then we're supposed to communicate effectively when we're an adult, which would require you to unlearn quite literally everything you did learn, that not only did you learn, but was dependent on survival. And that's what makes it so hard and so difficult to change, because you have to say,
Mm-hmm.
I can be safe. And you've continuously been told this is not a safe conversation to have. Nobody cares about your
Yeah.
feelings. Nobody cares that it sounds bad. It just is what it is. So stop. I'd be
Yeah,
out of a
it's
job if
like,
that worked.
yeah, I know.
Just stop.
My therapist
Just
can
stop.
literally never retire,
Yeah.
ever. But that's literally what it feels like. Like you sit there and people are like, "Oh no, this is a safe space. You're safe," and you're like, "I am safe." And then that little fucking gremlin in the back of your head's like, "No, you're not."
Yeah.
And you're just like,
Stop.
"Wait, am I not? Am I? Am I not? Am I? Am I not?"
Yes.
Like, and it's just like this constant. And it's not even just for BPD. It's basically for like anybody with attachment or abandonment trauma or styles and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like I never want to just say it's just BPD because there's
Yeah.
there's abandonment and attachment style issues in a lot of different mental health disorders or
Right.
just attachment style, your attachment style is like, I think mine is fear avoidant, which
Yeah.
is a blast.
That's fun.
So I know you as a therapist, you're just like, you hear that, you're like, yeah, that tracks.
Right. But like, and that's the hard part because there are things that you can do in communication. Like, obviously, the point of trying to communicate to somebody is you want them to do something, right? I want you to
Right.
respect my boundary. I want you to take no and have that be okay, and we don't argue about it. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to, help me out when I want help. Asking for help, that's a whole other box.
That's a no for me, dog.
Um, Terrifying, right? So because of the
Absolutely.
feedback that we've gotten. So
Mm-hmm.
if there's a lot of things that happen in communication, like that fawning, that like not standing up for yourself, which just fuels this idea, that little gremlin, right? It's like, no, it's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
That fuels that, like not being able to stand up and be able to stand up for your self-respect, being able to respect yourself. That just feeds into that perceived disrespect or overt disrespect from other people, depending
Mm-hmm.
on what way we're viewing it from. We all have a lens we view things from through our
Oh,
experiences,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
So,
all of us have different experiences with different.
absolutely. And that's the hard thing, right? So, and I always tell people, if you think about it, like if you and I were to be walking down the road and we saw this accident, you are like, oh my gosh, that was awful, but like, I'm okay. I'm over here having a panic attack because it's so traumatic to me. How do you communicate to somebody who doesn't understand? How do we communicate to each other like, hey, that was really traumatic for me, and you're like, I don't get it. And I would have to have those skills to be able to say, hey, I understand you have this different experience. You may have severe trauma that's not, it doesn't even touch it, where I don't, and that's been the most traumatic thing for me. And how do we connect on that to be able to acknowledge like, hey, I respect that that's how you feel and I can't understand it, but we still maintain the relationship and communicate.
Right. Also, like, sometimes it's not even trauma. Sometimes it's because my sister and I are very different. I try to lead with logic a lot, but I am very much like an emotionally led person
Mm-hmm.
where she's very logic, rational, stuff like that. So where I'm like, feeling she feels empathy, like
Yeah.
let's put that out there. But where I'm like feeling super empathetic and I'm like, oh my god, that must have been so awful, and she's like, yeah, that's awful, but that has nothing to do with us. And she can lead with that logic, and I think that's also important to note that sometimes it depends on whether a person is more led with emotion mind than rational mind,
Yep.
because there's very few people that actually get like the sound mind like balance
Yep.
well. Like I
Yep.
try, but I'm still like a very emotional. That's my Scorpio rising. I'm sorry, but it's
That's right.
like I'm a Capricorn, but I'm a Scorpio rising, and my Scorpio rising like runs this whole shit show.
Yeah.
So,
And it,
I very much run with my emotions versus somebody that's very like logical that can come off as like cold and, callous when they're not. They lead with a different
right.
part of their brain.
Right. And that's on even validating, right? So,
Mhm.
it's not, and a lot of people will be like, well, if I validate you, that means you're right. But false.
Mm-mm. No.
Validating means like, hey, I see what you're carrying is heavy, and I see for you it's heavy. That it's not saying actually it is heavy or it isn't. It's saying I can see for you that that's really tough. And then
Mhm.
being to go in, you're talking about a situation where, I may be more logical or I may be more emotional. You kind of have to, there's a lot of things go into that, right? So I'm sitting here thinking like your
Right.
whole perception, like your mood, like, what's been going on in your
Mhm.
life lately, but also having that person where you feel like you can communicate to and get to that logical point. So you guys are in
Mhm.
different cars. It doesn't mean you can't get to the same location. It's just how do we, and how do we each respect each other and maintain that relationship in the meantime?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to backtrack a little, because I realized I didn't ask you this, but what got you into therapy
Oh gosh.
and listening to
Well,
other people's shit? What got you into that? Like, we all
possibly,
appreciate it. Like, I literally love my therapist.
Yeah.
more than anything. But what the hell got you into this?
I always wanted to be a teacher. My kindergarten teacher, preschool teacher, I can't remember, which one it was. She was just so wonderful. And I was like, I want to be a teacher forever. And then, time went on and, I was that person that all my friends came to and they were like, hey, like this is what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, whether it was one thing or the other, I grew up on the farm. So like if you're talking logical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
there's no emotion there.
You
But
can't.
not to say that I'm not emotional myself, because we're all humans too as therapists.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I guess the biggest thing for me is, I guess, recognizing that all of my friends came to me and they really trusted my sound advice that was really objective
Mm-hmm.
to be able to navigate what they were going through, especially after I took my
Mm-hmm.
first psych class. So, my first psych class in high school, I took Psych 101, and I was like, this is it. This is what I want to be. And then from there, it was all downhill, uphill from there.
Sideways.
I hear people, I don't know why you people going to do therapy, not necessarily those words, but, I'm like, I don't get to hear the good days a lot. I don't, I help
Mm-hmm.
carry people through like the worst days of their lives, and to be able
Mm-hmm.
to validate that that's even a safe space for people to talk about. Like, it, I'm a human, and they're like, "Well, I don't mean to dump this on you." I was like, "Well, this is my job. I didn't sign up for people to come and tell me
Literally.
the good days." I did. Like, if I did, I don't know what. I'd be a hairdresser, maybe. I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh
it's kind of
no, no,
like,
no, 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 because I'm a licensed esthetician on top of that, and let me tell you, it's a running joke that you wind up having your minor in psychology because
mhm,
people will literally tell you
yes,
the most unhinged, like
oh
you
yeah,
will learn so much about your clients that you were just
oh,
like, I don't even know this about my own family. I love it. I
hmm,
absolutely love it. I love that they can be like with me and feel safe enough to, dump or whatever,
yeah,
and sometimes it's a trauma dump and sometimes it's the guess what my neighbor did thing, but or my ex or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you just create these safe spaces for people to dump, and this, that,
yeah,
and the third.
yeah. And and we don't get a whole lot. I think I've been doing therapy since 2015. I've done
Mm-hmm.
inpatient mental health with adults, with kids, partial hospital now. I'm an outpatient. I did substance. So really, I like to think I'm not that old, but my clients remind me that I am, some of my younger ones. But side note, one of them told me that Facebook was like out recent, like it's not cool anymore.
Yeah, okay.
And I was like,
All
what?
right.
I was like, wait a minute, what is happening? And I
I
have
know.
some younger kiddos, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna need to take a second there. But just it's just a wild ride, and like even through all of that, I maybe have had like a few people be like, hey Becky, like you really made a difference in my life. And we don't get
Aw.
that all the time. I see like we get like small wins in therapy where they're like, I thought of you like in my head, and I was like, what would Becky say? And I was like, see, you're not even gonna need me anymore. And they're like, you're not going anywhere. And I was like, okay. we're gonna
Yeah,
we're
no, I'm
gonna
the same way with my therapist. My therapist will be like, see, you're gonna be out in no time. I'm like, no, I'm not.
yes.
No, I'm not. No,
I'm not.
mm-mm, mm-mm. No, I'm gonna still be looking at your face every 2 weeks
Yep.
because mm-mm, mm-mm.
Yep.
Even if sometimes it's just like a gossip hour where I'm just like, I need to unload on all the shit that's happened this week. I don't necessarily want to do the work right now, or like there's no work to be had, but you have got to hear the bullshit that
Yeah.
hit my radar this week. And they're just like, give it to me. And I'm like,
Right.
wow.
Where do I start? But seriously, like I know a lot of people like, well, all I did was I just like dumped on you. And I was like, there's a lot to that though. Like there's
There's a
so
lot of
much that
processing with that.
correct, and how we processing. So everything is a learning opportunity, even if, clients are like, all I did was just bitch to you. And I was like, well, we didn't though, because we learned on like how do we interact with people? How do we put boundaries in? Just the other day, I think one of my clients, they were overwhelmed, and they were like, I've got so much going on. There's this email and these people are asking for extras and I don't know how. And I want to, but like, I don't know. And I'm just anxious, right? So when we're in
Mm-hmm.
that anxious emotional mind, we can't really make those great decisions. And
No.
how many people I've talked to about like, hey, you start out with like, hey, I hear what you're saying, right? So I understand, this is what you're asking for. I would love to, and then also decline, right? So I would love to, and this is, the situations where I could, and this situation I can't. And then you wrap it up with like, hey, just really appreciate you like coming on or like working with me or whatever it is that you have that problem, you have that kind of like that sandwich thing of
Ah,
positive
yes,
or
the
negative.
sandwich.
Like
Yep.
it's
That we
it's
call it the BPD call out sandwich is what I call it. Like when they're like, you're doing really great. You kind of like you got to work on this, but like also you're really it's like you got to
yeah,
sandwich the good in with the bad. Otherwise, all we're gonna focus on is
the
the
bad.
bad thing we did, and we're gonna ruminate on that for at least 3 months.
Yeah. And that's in being like, the education part where you're talking about like that's why I shut down. Like, hey, I really love that you came to me and you said like I was being an asshole the other day and I need to kind of do some thinking on that. I was expecting this. It shocked me that it was coming from you. I don't know what's going on with you. Kind of having that back and forth so we're not assuming. So we're listening to understand versus letting
Mm-hmm.
that little part in our brain that just runs away with everything, the anxious Annie. I try to tell people like personify her, like have her like be this thing that like runs up to you and is like, oh my gosh, I have something that's really, really important. And you're like, okay, well let's think about that for a second and let's not go off running with things that have happened previously. Like let's actually understand and listen to what's going on versus scanning and waiting for that one thing for you to say. And then you're waiting, you don't hear anything that anybody else says, which could actually solve the problem. And then you respond with something that ends up being a hot mess. Yeah. Did I get that right? Is
We
that good?
we prefer to avoid that. So we had talked earlier about like off camera how to communicate with Anne instead of but.
Yeah. So
Let's dive into that one.
that is the biggest thing that I think is really important because a lot of people are like, you're a good person, but you're a jerk. And then all you hear is like, I'm a jerk. So if you say, hey, I know that you're a really good person, and so but means
Mm-hmm.
forget everything that I just said, because actually that's crap. This is actually what I mean. And with and, you're saying both parts.
Mm-hmm.
Both parts are valid, right? So I love you and I think you're a great person and I'm struggling to understand. So you have to add that curious part in there. You have to add that
Mm-hmm.
understanding and that learning of who that person is because with all of our wonderful experiences, everybody's not that person. What is happening?
My Will is I'm guessing playing Helldivers and screaming his head off because the whole part of I'm recording today apparently in one ear and out the other. It's fine. It's fine.
Communication skills, right?
Huh?
Communication.
No, his listening is absolute trash. Adore him, but there's that might the listening might be one of the reasons that,
Struggle.
shit hit the fan.
Maybe, perhaps, who knows? The jury's still out on that one.
It's fine. We're getting along. I don't care.
Hey, you know what?
But
Sometimes you gotta pick your battles. That's the other thing too, right? Like in love, it's
picking your
like
battles, yes.
I mean,
I used to
as
be
if
the one that picked every battle, every single battle. I was like, you know what? You're the one today.
you picked the wrong woman on the wrong day. So hello.
Yep. Get the
I
right
know that.
idea, but the wrong bitch. Yeah.
It's like me when I was
It's fine.
dating.
Oh my God.
But
I'm not looking forward to that.
just don't. Just
Just don't.
that's
That's
hard
pretty much
path.
my mantra right now. Just don't.
Just don't. But like, right, so choosing your battles, like what do you decide? And how do you do that? Especially if you're in the moment you're triggered by something. Being
Mm-hmm.
able to sit there and even if you practice like delaying or like pausing for a second or being able
Mm-hmm.
to really be really aware of how you're feeling. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to literally rage, step away. Not everybody can handle that. Your partner may be one that chases. or your friend or whoever it is, that's a dynamic to really kind of be able to communicate to them like, hey, so if you're a chaser, right, the anxiety is we're not going to solve this issue and it needs to be solved right now, and if we don't solve it right now, everything's going to burn to the ground.
I feel attacked.
Listen,
I'm very much if when people are like, we need to talk, I'm like, right now.
right
Right
no,
now, because we are not talking about this
no,
later, and now my dog has decided to lose her mind. It's fine.
also wants to talk right now, so validating that, right? So
Yeah,
but that's a thing, right? So being able to say like, hey, I'm really anxious right now and I cannot hear, we need to talk. I need you to say, hey, I would like to talk about X, Y, and Z. This is kind of what I'm thinking about. I don't have time right now. We are going to be okay. I just want to be able to talk to you about that. That
exactly.
that works into that trust, right? So then you
Yep.
invite that person like, hey, you know, what are you thinking? Like, here's what I want to accomplish with this conversation, which is very
Right.
like therapy, right? Like with
Mm-hmm.
the they call them like training wheels, like the sentence structures and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Because I don't love that all the time. I like to do therapy without it feeling so therapy, but sometimes you can't avoid it. But so being able to develop that trust with that anxious attached person or that person who's like just can't handle waiting, to be able to reassure them and then be able to demonstrate that trust for them. So yes, you can say that, but if you're not actually going to follow through, that's when the problem's going to happen. That person is never going to be able to change that until, maybe something else happens that's not savory, but that's there's some skills there if you have somebody who just won't leave you alone when they're rightfully anxious.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are like just a couple things that somebody with an anxious attachment style, what can they be doing? Because I know we've talked a lot about what people on the outside can be
Mhm.
doing for like their anxious little gremlins that they know and love, but what can somebody with an anxious attachment style or some sort of like what can they be doing to better communicate, and also what can they be doing that kind of just starts to create a safe space besides obviously finding a therapist and going to therapy and really diving in, because this is not going to be a one size fits all answer, but
Right. So, and that's a big like vague thing, right? So it starts with making sure that you have people at your table who are actually going to support and listen to you. So you're not going to have those toxic people. You're going to be able to have that discernment to be able to say like, "Hey, I know this person well enough," and that's where you kind of have to really, like in dating, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I love him," after 2 months or something, and you're like, "Okay, you don't really know that person." So being able to know who you're talking with, deciding where your vulnerability is, and your capacity along with the other person's capacity. Because listen, somebody may love you and they be maybe your best friend, but I can't go to all of my friends with all the same issues. So I have to know who has that capacity for me based on what I'm looking for. So if I'm looking for
mm-hmm,
somebody to set me straight, even though I don't want to do that, I know who I'm going to go to. If I have somebody that I
mm-hmm,
just want to bitch to and get shit off of me and then be like, oh, hell yeah, like, yep, you're totally right. And just validate me, that's another friend. But the other part is you being able to advocate. So if that person is able to say like, hey, you know, this made me really nervous, and practice having those conversations with somebody, that's the biggest thing. And being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So you have to have that safe person. Yeah. About
yeah,
that, no.
yeah.
It's not easy, right? So I can like put them on all these sentences and you're like, that's great. Still no. Um, being
Mm-hmm.
able, I can't stress how you can't just do this with just anybody. You can't just pick somebody off the street and be like, hey, I'm gonna fix my anxious attachment with you. We're gonna have a relationship and we're gonna fix it. Um,
Yeah, no,
false.
no, you
No,
can't.
no.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah. Yeah, no.
That's called
So
Tinder, and that doesn't work.
no. It, just no. Just no. Um, it's finding that person that you actually can be safe with, because
Absolutely.
if you have somebody who's just going to listen to respond, you're never going to be safe. I don't care how much work you do. You have to
Mm-hmm.
decide to end that relationship. And that's with interpersonal skills and being able to say, like, hey, how do I, and not in a way of like, oh, you're going to be tested or like, that drama that you like back in middle school, or like, I thought my
Yeah.
son through this test or whatever and see if she passes. Not like that. But in a situation of like, hey, like, how do people treat like people who are below them? How do people respond? Who do they hang out with? Do they have long-term relationships? Are they able to maintain those things?
Mm-hmm.
How do they respond to big mental health or stressful life issues? If they're like, probably not going to be a safe person for you to approach and try to
Yeah.
do that.
If they've got more red flags than you, they're not a safe
Oh,
person.
shit. No, it's true. True, though. Listen, and red flags aren't always like the worst thing. It's what we
Literally, I
do
was just
about
gonna say
them.
everybody has red flags.
Everybody's got
Every single
them.
person has a red flag. It just depends on how big the red flag is and whether that red flag can kind of turn green at some point,
And I think we kind of put
and if they're willing to
our
work on it.
and that's the biggest thing, right? Is I think we all have our red flags. I think we're all going to be like in recovery because to say that, do I think an anxious attached person is going to be able to have a different attachment style? I think it depends person to person, right? It depends
Mm-hmm.
on what each person brings out in you. My ex-husband is absolutely valid in his experience of me, and he's going to tell you something completely different than my boyfriend. Both are valid experiences of me. That's what they get from me, given
Mm-hmm.
what I get from them in that relationship, which is
Exactly. Yeah.
you have those red flags, but you can put a green one next to that. You can say like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
like I've got this trauma and I've got these responses and it's not always going to be perfect with me, but I'm going to do my best so long as you tell me it's safe and you demonstrate that it's safe, which is a green flag to be able to
Mm-hmm.
work on that. I'm going to tell you, hey, I can't hear, we need to talk about it because as soon as you do, I have a physical response. So I have this, if you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, right? So this is the other way. If you're like a visual person,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like your brain and all the things you're like that you have these responses for. It's like this path up this really grassy hill. So it's grassy hill, long grass. You've got this path that you always do. Like every time you hear, we need to talk, boom, you're right up that hill on that left side. That's a dirt
Mm-hmm.
path. You're ready to go. You don't even think about it. Your brain just does it, right?
Right.
And what we're asking you to do in therapy is recognize that thing. Stop yourself
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom of that left path, bring yourself over to the right side, and go up that. And so we've already talked about like that hill's grassy. The grass is really tall. There's sticks, there's stones, there's all of these things on that right side. And you have to have a safe person to do that with, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have to physically stop and be aware, switch your response to that, advocate, do whatever you need to do in that situation. And then eventually your brain is literally going to change and that's going to be your new go-to.
Yep.
That's not quick or
1,000%.
easy.
No, it's not. As somebody who's been in therapy for 7 years, unpacking my shit,
Yeah.
and still learning that I'm worth it. I'm not too much. I'm, not this, not that. I mean, I'm 32. Like, I'm still unlearning a lot of shit. And I've been in therapy since I was 25.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just about regular. I think the biggest gap I took was like 6 months.
Yeah.
But I've been in therapy this entire time. So this isn't like something that you're going to get over in like a year. Maybe you will. Maybe
No.
maybe it's
No, no.
not like deep ingrained like genetic brain damage trauma like me. But, you
Trauma
know,
changes your brain. Trauma
yeah,
changes your
it literally
physical
alters.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah, and trying to rewire all that is literally trying to like
Right.
rewire all the electric in a 7,500 square foot house.
That might
Good
be
fucking
easier.
luck.
That might be
That
easier.
actually might be
It's,
easier.
it's a lot. I would rather do that.
Yeah,
but
honestly.
but that's that hill thing, right? All of that
Mhm.
just to go over here, you could just move electricity or replace it in a house. You're saying,
Mhm.
hey, I have to stop this every single time. And that's exhausting just stopping it and being aware that it's happening. And then now you're
Mm-hmm.
telling me as Beccy, as a therapist, I gotta come over here, I gotta pull that little brain, and I describe it as like this little 5-year-old that just runs off, just like,
Mm-hmm.
I got it. Come
Mm-hmm.
over here, stop, or come over and rewire our brain. That's exactly what you're doing. You're creating new neural pathways and hoping the other ones will die off.
And it's hard. It's
It is the
really
most
flipping hard.
exhausting. That's the most exhausting thing. You know, there's
I'm
so
so
many
goddamn tired.
people,
I really
which you can't
am.
do with rest. Which you can,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many people that are like, I'm so tired, I'm gonna take a nap. I'm like, okay, but are you physically tired or are you like emotionally tired? And
Emotionally,
yeah,
we're all set over here.
yeah, yeah,
But it's worth the work. It's just it's a lot and it's exhausting, but also I know I'm a lot better of a person now
yeah,
than I was 7 years ago or even 3 years ago. And I
yeah,
like can somewhat talk myself out of some things. Somewhat.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm also getting to a point where I can ask for the reassurance if I need it. Where I'm like, hey, I need a little bit more. I still want to throw up when I
Yes.
ask for it, but I'm asking for it.
Right. And
And
then
that's huge,
it is. It
especially
is.
for somebody that's just like, I'm
I'm
fine.
gonna have a meltdown
Everything's
every
in.
month. It's fine.
Yeah.
But it's true. And being able to have that support system is going to be huge for you to be able to heal in. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have that support system, if you don't have those healthy people who are going to be like, oh my gosh, of course I'm going to reassure you. It's really not even a big deal. It's not too much. It takes 5 seconds for me to be, of course I love you, or of course I will be there for you, or of course I will
Mm-hmm.
help you. It's a no doubt kind of thing that, like you said, you didn't start therapy till 25. We got 20 years worth of work to undo. 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you're still living, obviously. So you're adding things on daily, weekly, monthly. So
Mm-hmm.
in therapy, a year is nothing.
It really isn't. And like I would like to point out that I started therapy at 25 when my brain was fully dysfunctionally developed.
But you
So
still have 2 more years.
we're
You still
rebuilding
have,
from oh, do I? Oh God.
no,
Okay.
not
So I just like
27.
squeaked in. Squeaked in. That makes me feel a little bit better. I thought it was 25.
No.
So
Oh,
that makes me feel a little bit better. Like I started undoing the dysfunction, sort of.
not all the tools. And that's the thing. And how much does somebody sit there and be like, "Oh, I should have known." Okay, this is you at like a fully developed brain with all of these experiences,
Yeah.
and you're saying this 16-year-old kid should have no, because their brain's
They're a
not developed.
child. They're literally
Complete-
not even legally allowed to do jack shit. You expect them to should have known about something? Like no. No.
It's true. It's true, and that's the other thing, like that we learn. Mom and dad or our elders, we don't question them. Well, I mean, maybe we should, like, just because they're
Oh, I
older
did.
than
That
you.
was the problem.
It's not the problem, though.
Right. No, no, no.
Yeah.
Now it's
Yeah,
that's the
according to
thing.
who?
Like when I got
Right.
told I was a difficult teenager, I'm like, I grew up in a super strict household and I was like mentally ill. What do you mean I was a difficult teenager? I was a kid.
Yeah,
Get over yourself.
correct. Absolutely
Like
correct.
that's kind of where I'm at. And like we're in a much different place now. Much different. But every time it comes up that you were a difficult teenager, I'm like,
I hear what
okay,
you're
well,
saying, and we have a difference of opinion there, so we're just
you were
putting that
difficult parents. That's
boundary.
all I'm gonna say.
Right.
like
Right.
like we've all grown, we've all evolved, we're all different people. Stop bringing up
Yeah.
XYZ.
Right. Right.
Like I'm not
And
that
what
person
is
anymore. If you're
and
the
the
same
other
person at 32 that you were at 15, like there is a problem.
correct. And what I like to really tell people, a line I kind of give them is, what were you hoping to accomplish with that? Was saying that? Like, what were you hoping to accomplish by saying I was a
Mm-hmm.
difficult teen? Because then they have to think about, oh, they're either going to or they're not, right? It depends on how healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, okay. I guess that was for me to just be mean.
Yeah,
Hopefully they
explain
think.
it to me like I'm 5, please.
And that's where that curious, right? And I know we talked about that off camera too,
Mm-hmm.
is to be curious, right? I used
Mm-hmm.
to call it like, well, I just play dumb all the time and like really ask people a lot of questions. And then they kind of get to it and they're like, oh, like at my job, oh, yeah, no, maybe I should be able. Actually, no, that is my job. Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, with that, like And like I said, like my everybody's come a long way in the family structure with that. Like there's a lot that's different from there.
Yep.
So it's not, I haven't heard that phrase in a very long time. But when I did, it
Mhm.
was like,
Yeah.
wait a second,
Yeah.
excuse me.
And that's another phenomenon that comes along where you have to go against in the communication because we
Mm-hmm.
go home and mom and dad are in the home and we're in the home, so we go flashback Friday to like mom and dad are the adults and you're the kid and you need to function as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the pecking order still. And you have to people have to go against that to be like, actually, I mean, yes, I am your child and I'm an adult child, which is very different. And so how do you be able to put those boundaries in and say,
Mm-hmm.
actually, mom, dad, whoever, you know, I don't appreciate that, or I'm gonna leave because I can now.
Mm-hmm.
As an adult, you can leave.
Yeah, I can go to my own house with
Absolutely.
my own bills that I pay for. You know, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So, yeah. And that's a whole other topic that we could do a whole other episode on, to be completely honest, because I
It's a
have my
thing.
opinions on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. There's so many things that just go
Hmm.
into everything. Everything is not just like a yes or no or a black and white, and it requires almost like the stars aligning for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, thank you for taking the time out for this. This
Absolutely.
was so helpful. And I'm really hoping that people that are listening to this that are struggling with communication can forward this to somebody and be like, no, this is how I need you to like communicate with me, or vice versa.
And then it's
And
it's a normal
yeah.
response. Like having an anxious thing, it does not mean, that it's going to be doomed forever. You have these tools, but both people have to work on that, right? You have to provide
Hmm.
a good space. And I'm not saying you're a shitty person. I'm saying like, hey, this is how we have to communicate. And these are
Exactly.
some of my trigger words, which okay, doesn't make sense to everybody else, and it does to me. And
Yeah.
that's the important thing is like making
Because
sure and versus but and like that
yeah,
curious thing.
yeah, because trauma is not one size fits all.
Or
It is very custom built.
yes, yes, it is. Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, hang on. No, we got a cat.
Oh,
There we go. We had
love
to
it.
we had to have a cat coming across the screen, or it wasn't hot mess espresso. It's fine. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out, and I'm
Absolutely.
so glad that we were able to finally chat about all this.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.